There's an RPG we're making called Spaceborne about interstellar travel, and I just finished modeling the rocket you'll call home.
This is the lowest level of the ship, and since this is a small space that can't be used for a lot, this is going to be the observatory. These windows here you'll be able to see out into space. What's this? Ladders that you can use? Yeah, fuck you, but it goes without saying that everything here is temporary. Everything's gonna have proper textures and colors on it later. Right now this is a phase called whiteboxing, where it's about the basic shapes and the layout. This is a library slash shared office area that I fucking hate. Yeah, this is why I realized just how much of a pain in the ass it would be to actually model out this map. I honestly think it's kind of funny if it's like this high-tech futuristic spaceship, but then they just have a dead-ass library full of physical books that nobody ever actually reads. Go up a level. And see, this is a dining room, living room area. Kind of gym. Yeah, I need to optimize this. This is the kitchen. Of course, it's not a kitchen without a shitty wire shelf. This is the TV area. And then this is a ping pong table, because there's very little space here, and everyone knows that something that's totally worth spending space on is a ping pong table. Now let's go back down to the bedrooms. There are a few big problems with human interstellar travel. One that's surprisingly hard to solve is the amount of time required. Even if we could make something move at the speed of light, you would have to gradually accelerate or dem G's would crush you. And the stupidest part is once you get to the halfway point of the journey, you would have to start slowing down. It turns out that hitting your target at interstellar speeds isn't a great idea. A lot of sci-fi media has people in cryogenic sleep, so at least they'll be alive when they get there. Cryo sleep is actually way cooler and way scarier than most sci-fi things make it out to be. It involves killing the target and simultaneously preserving their body by freezing them, then just reheating them and jump-starting their heart again. It's actually cryo sleep with the fishies, and then literal fucking resurrection. There's been actual research on this, and they've done it successfully with hamsters and mice. In fact, prehistoric microorganisms that were frozen in permafrost keep being resurrected by scientists hundreds of thousands of years later. Sounds like the beginning of a disaster movie. Yeah, sure thing, buddy. But it turns out none of this really matters, because scientists don't think that cryo sleep will ever work on humans because we're just too big. There's no way to thaw your whole body evenly enough and fast enough to resurrect you. The only way to get humans to another star system is to do a generational voyage, meaning that the passengers will die on their ship, and their descendants will be the ones to arrive at the destination. But there will be countless generations of people in the middle, who will be born on the ship and will die on the ship. Their lives already spoken for as another consumable resource for the project before their very conception. Up to this point, I was worried about trying to make a believable ship layout that uses the space efficiently, which meant that the first part of this really took a long time because I was just analysis paralysis, worried too much about making every little thing make sense. But then I realized two things. For one, a game map that has a shitty layout that actually exists is better than a theoretical perfect layout for a map that doesn't exist because I never finished it. But also I found that early on when I was trying different layouts, the more efficient I made things, the smaller they felt. And if we go back down here, this room technically has a very efficient layout in the sense that you have the entry point in the middle, and then everything else branches out from there. But you notice it actually feels really small when you're in it. Okay, I'm in a room. That's all it is. If we break up this space, it actually feels bigger. So like with this, it's a long, narrow hallway. All you know is that there's lots of doors, and it goes in a circle, so you can't really tell where it ends or begins. Even the thing of having to go up and then back down around through the dining room adds to this, because it turns out that the way we perceive spaces has less to do with the actual size and more to do with the amount of contents contained within a space and the complexity of the layout. It's almost like the more space it takes up in our brain, the bigger we perceive it as being. When I got to this level, I started really having fun with it, because now I was thinking more about game design and less about realism per se, as long as some of the basic requirements of realism are being met. This level is the farm. So like these are all going to be planters full of plants for consumption. It's a little greenhouse, got a little sink, a little prep area. Now these are going to be bug holders. That's right, this is a game about gross space people who eat bugs because they're gross space people, and that's what they do. And of course, it's very important to keep scaling and proportions consistent with level design, And one thing I found is that even if you're American, you should really use meters as your unit of measurement, because for one, it's just the default in most programs, but also because a square meter is around the space one person needs to comfortably stand. So like this doorway is exactly a meter wide, which means that it's a little bit tight, but you can fit through it. And also another good thing is that 2 meters is a little bit taller than the average person. And so you know that if you have a 2 meter high overhang, then your average person will be able to fit through it, but it'll be a little bit tight. Now this measurements are very useful for this nightmare of a level. So this is the storage level. Now I just couldn't bring myself to making like, you know, a grid of shelves or something that would make sense like that. So I decided, what's the next best thing but a literal maze? I like to imagine the crazy ass math somebody did to convince everybody that a maze was the most efficient way of storing their shit. But hey, what's the RPG's map without a maze somewhere in it? Okay, let's get out of here. This place is fucking... let's just randomly... oh. Yeah, this is the mission control, and also kind of a computer room. This is the server room. Now that over there is the captain's quarters, but we're not allowed in. Yeah, only a select few get to be graced with his presence. Moving on. Go up here. Now this is where the magic happens. This is the engine room. Now the ship in Spaceport has 2 separate engines on either side that are contained within these pillar things. It's a nuclear propulsion system, so there's fission reactors on either side that then heat up fuel that gets ejected out the back. Now, as I mentioned before, we will need to start decelerating at some point, and so these pillars on either side are double-sided, so in theory a switch can just be hit and you'll start pushing things out the other end. And of course the inertia will flip everything around, which brings us to gravity. That's one of the other big issues with long-haul space flights. Simulating gravity. Humans just aren't made to survive without gravity. A lot of science fiction media have it where they use centrifugal force to simulate gravity, which works, but asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The big problem with it is it doesn't just simulate gravity going outward, it also simulates gravity going in the opposite direction of the rotation. Objects will fall sort of diagonally, and it just leads to all kinds of unexpected behavior that kind of defeats the purpose of simulating gravity. I'm gonna be honest, most of the sci-fi stuff I learned from this, I learned from Tom Scott videos. But in this case, we're already having to gradually accelerate at a presumably consistent rate anyways. So I want to just make that rate of acceleration and then deceleration at a rate so that it simulates the gravities you'll have on the target location. So that's how we're explaining gravity in this game. Now this game only takes place on the first half of the mission, which means that things will always be facing this way. But if you notice, everything in this rocket is designed with a certain vertical symmetry, which means that in theory, if once everything goes upside down, it'll all still work. Even the doorways go all the way from floor to ceiling. That's where the actual operation of the engines happens. So it's enclosed so that you don't have to spend an unnecessary amount of time up here. Only the people who are actively working on the engine on a given time have to be exposed to the most irradiated section. I'm going to model in more detailed controls for the engines right here. I have to say, this whole thing was a lot more time consuming and difficult than I thought it would be. Somehow I thought I would finish this white boxing stage in like a few weeks. That was like 4 months ago. Just look around in the room you're in right now, and if you look at every single object, every single detail, and imagine if that were a decision you had to make. It almost feels surreal now seeing this space that I've imagined in my head and then seeing in the 3D modeling software actually in the game that I've been working on. Because I've been working on this game for the better part of a year, but I've mostly been doing systems and gameplay mechanics. If you guys have any thoughts or just interesting tidbits about interstellar space travel, or if you have any suggestions of things you want to see in this game, go ahead and let me know down in the comments.